and then if other people join, they will be able to catch up. Hello, everyone. My name is Agustina Besada. I'm the co-founder and director of Unplastify, and I'm here to share with you our journey and our learnings and what we do at Unplastify to change the human relationship with plastic, which is our main mission. So this journey actually started here. I was working as a director of a recycling center in Brooklyn, New York. I was literally working surrounded by these mountains of plastic that were coming in every day, collected by people walking around on the streets, collecting these cans and bottles and bringing them to this recycling center, and then we would sort them out, count them, put them in bags, and trucks would come and they would take them away. So I was literally shocked by the insane amount of plastics that I was I was seeing come in and out every day. So I started wondering, why are we producing so much plastic waste? And what is happening with all these plastics that are not lucky enough to end up in a recycling center? So the more I looked into this question, the ocean came up. So I was inspired by this idea of seeing with my own eyes what was happening with plastics in the ocean. A few years before that, I started sailing in the waters in front of Coney Island, there in Brooklyn. So I came up with this crazy idea of sailing from New York to Buenos Aires, Argentina, in South America, where I'm from and where I'm at right now, collecting and seeing with my own eyes plastics in the middle of nowhere. So this was the plan for the trip. Apparently, in order to sail from New York to Buenos Aires, I had to cross the Atlantic twice because it seemed that due to currents and wind, it's really, really hard to do it through the coast of America. So we couldn't do that. So the idea was to sail from New York to Europe, and then from Europe through the coast of Africa, crossing to the coast of Brazil, and then getting to Buenos Aires. So that was the plan, and that is what we did. So, but before that, so we had to get a boat, right? So this was, please, if you can mute your phones. So this was the 36-foot home I had for almost a year. It's called after a song that is called Funky. It's a rock song, and it was literally our home for almost a year. It took us 6 months to prepare for this journey. It was the first time welcome to living on board with snow. And then we set sail on May 2018, 2 years ago. We set sail from New Jersey in front of New York, and literally the first night was the worst of the entire trip. It was really, really rough. The sea was with waves from every direction. It was really, really cold. It was raining. Thankfully, we were not only two, we invited two friends coming with us. So we were four, feeling really, really sick. To me, it was my first 24 hours at sea. So it took me, you know, some days to adapt and develop what sailors call sea legs. We were definitely not having those sea legs that first night, so it was really rough. And then we had other challenging moments and situations in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. You cannot stop. You're always moving, you're always sailing, even if you don't see what's ahead of you in the middle of the dark, when there's no moon and everything gets super dark, you continue going. It's like it takes some time to adapt to that situation. And it was challenging for me, I have to say. Many people ask me, like, why are you putting yourself in this really challenging situation? Why are you putting yourself in danger? Because things could happen, things can go wrong. And I told them that I was literally obsessed with this idea of, well, I want to see this reality of plastics in the middle of nowhere, in the most remote places on Earth, and I want to be able to share that with people. So before setting sail, I contacted this research institute called 5 Gyres, and they lended me this device that you can see here on the screen. It's called the Manta Troll. So this device acts like it's like a 3-meter sock, basically. It allowed us to filter the surface of the water. So under certain circumstances, we would be able to take samples, filtering the surface, right? So water would come in through a hole the size of my hand, and it would be collected at the end of this device. This is you. Lots of microplastics, as you can see here in the sample. These blue bits, fibers, this black piece of film. I tested that it was not algae, it was not anything biological. So with every sample, I would take out everything that is biological, clean it up, and I would count and classify it according to the size and the type. So either if it was filaments, fragments, films, or foam. And this is just one sample. 2 hours device in the water, filtering through a hole the size of my hand, and we would find 226 plastic particles just in one sample. And let me tell you that in every single sample we took, we found plastic. So this is really what's out there. And this is where a lot of the plastics that are not lucky enough to end up in a recycling center are ending up. So what we learn with this first part is that when we throw plastic away, there is really no way, right? It ends somewhere. We're using an almost indestructible material. So it ends many times it ends up in nature, and it ends up in our oceans. So throughout the trip, I interviewed many experts in order to learn more about the problem and also about solutions. But let's dig into the problem first to better understand about it. So the first question we asked every person we interviewed was, what do you think is the problem with plastic? So let's decompose it. Like, we all understand that there's a problem with it. Like, what's the problem? So many mentioned that the fact that it's indestructible. Around 21% of them mentioned that the biggest problem is that it ends up in nature. And around an 18% mentioned that the problem is the excessive use. So yes, we are talking about an indestructible material that it takes more than 500 years to degrade. And yes, it is ending up in nature. And let me show you and tell you a brief story about this, this beautiful picture of me with this treasure I found. We were in an oceanic island between Africa and Brazil. There's this protected marine area. It's called Fernando de Noronha, and we were stopping there before ending the second crossing to Brazil. And we were swimming in one of these amazing and paradise beaches and waters, surrounded by turtles, little colorful fish, little sharks, everything. You could find everything there. And then swimming in this paradise, I find this bottle. And this bottle, I couldn't believe I was finding that. I look at it in detail, and it had bites of all different sizes. And, you know, it was kind of half degraded, and you were able to see that, you know, animals, of course, try to eat this bottle. And the another interesting fact was that I wasn't able to figure out what is it or what was it, because it had all Asian inscriptions. I don't know what language is it, but I can say it's Asian inscription. So we were in the middle of the Atlantic finding this bottle that probably was made or disposed, we don't know, in Asia. So this is a global problem. Our oceans connect us all. So this is not something that we can fix locally. So probably you've heard of these plastic islands. They're not really islands. They're more like giant soups. There are big concentrations of plastic and other debris in our oceans, and they're formed by these ocean currents. These same ocean current, for example, the North Atlantic Gyre that helped us sail from North America to Europe and then back to South America. So this is not debris that someone threw out in the ocean. Many times this is plastics, and this is waste that was produced inland, and then through our rivers, it's ending up in our oceans. And the third part is that we are using it excessively. I don't know if you have an idea of how much plastic you consume and how much plastic waste do you produce per year, but globally, it's an average of 100 pounds or around 50 kilograms. It depends on the metric you use. This is more or less my weight in plastic every year, each one of us. So I don't know what you think, but I think it's a bit too much. So then we also asked these experts, like, okay, but I mean, we understand. I mean, we're talking about an indestructible material. it's ending up in nature, and you know, we're using it excessively. What's the problem? What are the worst effects of these? And 36% of them answered that the worst effect is the damage to our ecosystems. 20% of them said something that to me was a bit scary, that it's the worst effects are still unknown. So this means that science is still figuring out the worst effects, but we cannot wait until we know exactly. And 20% of them mentioned the human health. So we already know that it's affecting our human health. Many people think that the oceans are further away and like really far, and okay, yes, we understand and we like oceans, but it's, you know, something completely detached from our, you know, urban lives. But this is wrong. I don't know if you know, but this is a fact that I really appreciate about the ocean, and I really like to highlight. Half of the oxygen we breathe comes from the oceans. So what will happen if we damage the surface of the oceans, right, as we are doing? I mean, this could heavily affect this amazing property that the oceans have, among many other properties that are connected to us. Fauna, it's of course one of the terrible effects, but it's not only fauna, it's the entire ecosystems. Any high school student would learn about ecosystems. They would understand that if you start making changes in, you know, some part of these complex systems, you damage the entire cycle. So this is what it's still unknown, because species are dying, and we're still trying to figure out what are the, you know, the secondary and the third effects of these terrible findings. And then lastly, it is getting into our food chain. And this is not only plastic. So this plastic, when it's in the environment, it acts like micro sponges. So these micro sponges attract toxic chemicals, and these toxic chemicals are entering our food chain. So it's not only about the microplastics that some studies estimate that we are ingesting. So we don't have to stop eating, you know, fish but it's not only about that. It's about these toxic chemicals that are entering the flesh of these animals and entering the food chain. So this has negative effects on our health, and scientists are trying to figure out and connect the dots, but studies are already showing that it has terrible potential effects. So, I mean, all this tells me that this is a terrible material, right? It seems that we have to stop using plastic somehow. But then there's an interesting story that a scientist, Andrés Cosar, from the University of Cádiz in Spain, told me. He told me, you know, plastic is contradictory, because on the one hand, it came to revolutionize the way we live in a good way. And on the other hand, the way we are using it, it's harming us. So he put the example of the turtles. Carey turtles back in the day were hunted for the value of their shells to make combs. So when we started making combs out of plastic, these Carey turtles were released from this pressure, right? And they were happy about plastic. But then what is happening today to these and many other species of turtles, right? These same turtles that were once released by this pressure, thanks to plastics, are now being entangled and affected and harmed and endangered, you know, by this same material. So this is more or less the same thing that is happening to us. So this is how I feel. I feel completely surrounded and entangled by plastic. So if you take a few seconds to think about all the plastics that you interact with in your daily life, from the moment you wake up, you wake up, you go to the bathroom, take a shower, brush your teeth, get your clothes on. A lot of them are made out of plastic as well. You have breakfast. I don't know if you realize, but we are completely surrounded by this material. But the important thing for us to learn was that the problem is not the material itself, it's its use and abuse. It's how we are using it, right? We are using it sometimes, for single use. We're using an indestructible material for minutes and then throwing it away when we know that there's no way. And we're using it excessively. So these two things are the problem. So this is why we say that it's a relationship problem. It's not the product itself, it's not the material itself. So we go to the good part, the solutions, right? So we also dig into what were the best solutions that we could replicate and sell up. The first solution that comes to everyone's mind when we talk about plastics, it's recycling. Of course, recycling has been an amazing alternative because a lot of these plastics are recyclable. Many are not. And it's not about the recyclability, let's say it in a word, but it's about the recycling systems and the demand for these recycled products. So the demand, it's still not there, and the recycling systems are still not there. So we've been trying to use recycling as the key solution to this problem for years, decades. But recycling rates are still very, very, very low. Only 9% of all the plastic waste is recycled. Only 9%. This is globally. So we cannot say that recycling is the key solution, right? According to this Ellen MacArthur Foundation graphic that shows us the global flows of plastic packaging. This is packaging. Half of the plastic that we consume and we produce as waste is packaging. It's plastic that probably had a really short use and then it was thrown away. So 32% of this plastic packaging waste is leaking into the environment. 32, 1/3, 1 every 3. This is a lot. I mean, and this is not something that we can fix just encouraging everyone to recycle. So we have to think other ways. And what we think is if you think about the entire life cycle of a plastic product, let's put a plastic bottles just as an example. So you have to produce plastic pellets out of fossil fuels. You put it into a factory, you produce the bottles, then you fill them with water, you close them up, you ship them to stores, brand new plastic bottle in the store, someone buys it, someone drinks it, they throw it away. Sometimes it gets recycled, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's incinerated, sometimes it gets just buried in landfills, and sometimes it escapes and ends up in nature, in our oceans. So I don't know what you think, but I feel that if we just stand up at the end of this product life, we are not being able to catch everything, right? It would be impossible just to recover every plastic we are throwing away and trying to make it recyclable or trying to recycle it. So what we think at Unplastify is that we need to reduce the demand. That's the only way. We need to redesign the products and try to be really smart on when we are using plastic, right? So this is, I mean, we need to think of these systemic changes to avoid single-use plastic. Single-use plastic is a design flaw. It's a design mistake. So we need to think not only as what can I do, you know, in terms of my daily life, which adds lots of value, but also how can we push and create these systemic changes? How can we design the new norm so we don't have to even produce this amount of plastic waste in the first place? So sailing to South America, we started mapping out solutions in the world and especially in South America. And we started categorizing them in different, in 6 areas. So solutions, we have many. The thing is we have to scale them up. We have to replicate them. We have to learn from successful stories. So we mapped and we identified that we have services that are avoiding single-use plastic. We have products, then we have, within products, we have alternative products, you know, reusables, or biodegradable products that can replace single use. And we also need to, you know, encourage the products that are made out of recycled material. We have awareness campaigns and information that's really, really important to provide powerful information to consumers. We have research. We have, you know, science is looking into understanding better the problem, but also trying to discover and develop new alternative products and alternatives for you know, managing these material. We have actions such as activities, events, contests, projects. You know, put your ideas in action so you can encourage others to take action as well and to realize about this issue. At Unplastify, we always say that the first part is to acknowledge, it's to experience this problem. We organize cleanups, and the most powerful part of a cleanup is that when you connect with the problem, when you realize. So once you see, you can't not see. So it's really difficult to stop seeing plastic everywhere once you clicked. And lastly, regulation. Regulation is really, really powerful. There has been lots of bans in different cities. Even national governments are working on regulations to phase out plastics that we don't really need. But again, we're not against all plastics. We're not against all disposable plastics, especially in these days that we are facing a really challenging time with the COVID. I mean, in healthcare, it's justifiable, of course. We you know, safety first. But in many other uses, do we really need it? Do we really need disposable plastics? So I think regulation puts solutions at scale sometimes, but usually doesn't happen until, you know, individuals or organizations don't commit or don't show. So there's no one many, and they all collaborate and they are all part of the solution. And lastly, who has to do all these, right? So of course we have governments. You know, they have a big role to play, but they're not alone. And another key player here are the companies. And the companies are really trying to research, are trying to, some of them are trying to find alternatives to their products. But then lastly, we as consumers, every time we buy something, we are voting. So what do we choose when we go to a grocery store? What do we choose to vote, right? And we can also, support organization. We can also spread the word. We can also support regulation. We can also get involved. There's so many things that we can do as individuals that whoever wants to be part of the solution, which we can all be part of the solution, we can. And it's really, really powerful. Like, we've been mapping out regulations and how they were successful stories, and it's usually pushed by people. So if we all get involved, we will make this transition to an unplastified world much faster. So we can all take action and scale up systemic solutions. We can all be part of it. And lastly, I'm gonna just tell you what we do at Unplastify. We are a social enterprise. Our mission is to change the human relationship with plastic. And we do this accelerating systemic solutions to reduce the use of single-use plastic. We work with companies, we work with governments, we work with schools, we work with the clubs. We try to engage with different groups of organizations and working with them in a transition to unplastify operations, unplastify products, and designing new norms, designing these new systems more efficient. And how we do it, we always pursue for this exploration phase first. It's really important to click, to connect with the problem, to understand, to get aware. Then it's really important to get informed in order to make informed decisions. So we have the science, we have, the experts talking to us and teaching us, and we at Unplastify try to simplify those messages in order to define the course of action. And thirdly, the action piece of it. If we are aware, if we are informed, but if we don't take action, there's no change. So we need to take action, and each organization can design a course of action engaging everyone in the organization. And we have done this successfully. Everyone gets involved once they are invited to be part of it. And they do, and they are excited about it, and they see that this is nonsense, and they would rather, work in an office that it's more unplastified. So you can all replicate these and push for this change in your organizations and even at your own home, because most of us are nowadays working from home and spending a lot of time at home. So even with our daily lives, right, at homes, we can design new norms. So we invite you to do that. All of you, I think we have some questions that would be amazing to dig into. I'm going to put my video. I invite you to put your video, so we'll do this last part more interactive. You can always, reach out to us afterwards. We will spend 15-20 minutes with Q&A. And but I invite you to also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you use, at Unplastify. And you can also find in our website a library with all the most important research you can find online. Everything is collected there and simplified, so you can access everything that you have to know about this issue if you want to dig into it. So let's see the questions. Let me take out the presentation mode. Now I can see some faces, which is good, because I feel that I wasn't talking alone, at least. Maybe Eileen, my colleague Eileen, can help me figure out some questions. over there, or if someone wants to, you know, ask the question through the video. I like that we are a good number and we can make it more participative.
Hi everyone, I'm also Aileen, part of Unplastify team. So we have some questions here. That is always really common in our talks. So a lot of people ask about bioplastics. So is bioplastic the solution? What do you think, Tati?
Well, I have to add that to the presentation because we have recycling very clear. We have to add the bioplastics one. I'm really, you know, skeptical about these magic solutions. Bioplastics are, you know, an interesting alternative that is coming up. I don't think we are ready to, you know, make everything bioplastic because we will have the same problem. Bioplastics act like plastics. So we will have similar problems with bioplastic. With the difference is that some of them are made out of other products, biologic products, instead of fossil fuels, with the difference that some of them decompose faster. But at the rate we are using it, these materials, I don't think it's a magic solution. And another aspect that I don't like about bioplastics is that they mess up with the recycling systems. So let's say, you know, we start mixing up products in New York City, let's say, because I don't know, just to put one example, and some products come with in bioplastic packaging and some others in just plastic, you know, and then we encourage recycling, and you know, it looks like plastic, so I will just throw it into the recycling bin. Okay, so when that gets to a recycling facility, that entire batch of recycling plastic will get damaged because of that bioplastic. So it's not as simple to introduce a new material that acts similarly, looks similarly, but it's not that simple. So I'm really skeptical with these magic solutions. Bioplastics have different you know, angles, different aspects, different properties. They're not all the same. So I would be very skeptical about that, especially seeing our, you know, recycling rates. It's not that you communicate to people, this is bioplastic. Oh, they read and they, you know, what to do. So we have proven that we are not very good at informing everyone what to do. So we cannot rely on that. Again, I think we will just step upon the same zone again. So we need to be very skeptical with these magic solutions. Aileen?
So Isabella is asking maybe if we can give some details about examples of what we do in companies. Maybe we can tell people about our unplastifying process with big companies or things like that.
Yeah. So we have different programs. We divide them in educational challenges and company challenges. And then the third part is public policy challenges. We like challenges. So with education, what we do is to, we have a program with schools, and it's supported by National Geographic, and we work with schools in Latin America. We engage students. We try to inspire them. We try to make them connect with this problem and take the cost. And we guide them to design strategies to unplastify their schools. Unplastifying, again, it's okay, how can you make a permanent systemic change at your school to avoid single-use plastic? This is not like a recycling awareness campaign. This is just like, okay, let's put a ban let's convince the cafeteria not to use, you know, disposable utensils anymore. They have the ideas. What we do after that is we create change makers. So we just give them the tools to implement those ideas. We just give them project management tools. So we moderate these. It's like a competition type. They had to collaborate with other schools as well, but we just give them project management tools, and they have to implement their projects. And at the end, they show their impact. This has been amazing. With companies, it's really similar, but there's no competition intercompany. We, you know, support them even further. We start with the diagnosis. We really dig into their plastic waste production. We look at their waste stream, but also at their suppliers and what they buy, and we calculate what are the sources and what are the items, the plastic items that are most impactful, and we measure everything. We put that into the pie chart, and we show them, okay, you know what? I mean, if we tackle bottles and cups, coffee cups, we will just, you know, avoid 80% of the plastics that you are using at the office. So it's really important to first measure, you know, get a real sense of where the problem is, what are the key items, and this is different from office to office. So we don't have a key solution. So we work with them in identifying and diagnosing. Then we work with them and we mix up different from people from different areas. And we do a similar workshop with them that the one we do with schools. And we invite them to design these solutions, systemic solutions. And they come up with really good strategies. So then it's a matter of accompanying them and helping them throughout the process. And it's usually changing buying policies, communicating, making everyone aware, engaging all employees to be part of these. Some of them want to phase it out. Some of them want just a ban from one day to another. Just you know, there's no more disposable coffee cups. That's it. If you don't bring your own mug, you don't drink coffee. That's it. Some of them are more radical. It's funny to see. And the third challenge we have is the policies, and we work with policymakers and at national levels and city level, and we help them, especially bring all stakeholders to the same table. That's the key part. If you try to just talk to environmentalists and people who want bans and try to pass, you know, a ban on plastic, you will have the, you know, plastic industry against you. But if you try to engage them and try to moderate tables in which you can work all together and trying to identify, okay, what about these? What about that? Okay, but let's start with this one that we are all agreeing that this is not harming everyone. So that is what we really try to do with public policy. Sorry that it was a really long answer, but I hope it was clear.
So we have more questions, maybe? Anyone that wants to talk or wants to say anything?
I see some people asking about, you know, in this context of the pandemic, if it will have a long-term negative impact on reducing plastic. I think so, unfortunately. I think so, and I think there's I mean, it's interesting because with the insane amount of information that is out there, everything talking about the same, we still are lacking information about this and about many other things. So there's what we have identified in our research and our conversations is that there's a sense, there's a feeling that if it's wrapped up in plastic, it's cleaner, it's safer. but not necessarily. That's not necessarily the case. So let me be clear about this. In terms of medical context, you know, for doctors, nurses, hospitals, we are, you know, not getting in there. But still, I think, at least here in South America, many of them are going into reusable options, reusable masks that they can clean. So that's one thing that I mean, I think it's completely justifiable. But then when we are talking about consumers in our daily lives in this context, I think that's when we are kind of yeah, we're going backwards. And I think this this awareness that was created, you know, from, I would say, these past 2 years, it has been amazing how this plastic issue suddenly, you know, got momentum and started being on the agenda. And then suddenly we are all forgetting about that, and we are buying everything in the grocery store, you know, with a million bags, plastic bags, and I think that's a mistake. And it's not necessarily cleaner or safer. And I think we need to inform clearly what are the risks and what are the opportunities of this type of behavior. And I think we will have to, yeah, we have to see where these really challenging times leave us in terms of plastic production, plastic use. And lastly, I think we have to figure out ways of taking care of our health without, you know, damaging or continue damaging other things that indirectly will hurt our health as well. So that is what we need to be aware.
I'm also reading the questions. Well, about the sharing and the video and everything, don't worry that we are going to share this record session and put it in our YouTube channel, Unplastify.
Yep.
But
I have some other questions I identify, Aile. So there are two. One is, what did I study? I studied industrial design, and like in college, and then I did a master's in science in sustainability management in New York. That's why I was living there. And then I did an executive program in business, in entrepreneurship. So I have a kind of a mix. And this is related to the other question about how do we fund, what's like, because we are a social enterprise, we are not a nonprofit. So we have this mixed business model. Part of our programs, so especially the education programs, are funded by grants or different supporters. And then the work we do with companies, it's a service as a consultants. So we have a combined source of income. I don't know if that answered some of your questions. Studying industrial design will really get you thinking about material life cycles. See, yeah. So it's interesting because I don't work as an industrial designer anymore, but I think it really shaped the way I think about the material cycles in general, and system thinking, and how we need to redesign these systems, understanding the different stakeholders, the different parts. So I have a very schematic designer way of thinking, I think.
And Tati, they also ask if you think that technology has a role in circular economy.
Yes, definitely. I would like to highlight that circular economy, and probably you know, but I would like to highlight that circular economy, it's not about recycling. So that's the first thing I want to put out there. It is about what I'm saying, about redesigning the systems so they're more efficient. And this is really important because I see it very often that it's used as a synonym of recycling, which is not. Recycling within a circular economy is the last resource. So in this case, we need to think how to maintain the value of materials for as long as possible within the economy. And this is not just through recycling, because as we saw, recycling is very not efficient in terms of recycling rates. So we need to be smarter than that, right? I think technology is key, also in part of this redesigning the systems. Kampa asked a question early on, and she's asking,
it's
looking at disposable cups. Yep.
Well, it looks like she has made some research about reusable cups, and she says that apparently aren't better for the environment. Looking at the LCA, where hot water and detergent is used, the material of which the reusable cup is made of, and at the end of life. Well, that's a...
Well, I haven't seen that research. I can look into that. I have other sources that tell me otherwise. What I have to say is that, how do I put this? The plastic industry had been funding research since the 60s to, support their arguments for disposable plastics. Life cycle analysis only takes into account one aspect or two. But how are you taking into account plastics in the middle of nowhere, getting into our food chain, poisoning our food? I don't know if those life cycle analyses are taking that into account. I have done life cycle analysis, and they usually look into other aspects. So I think it's difficult to compare pears to apples sometimes if you are not taking into account the same variables and a scope of negative impact broad enough that will allow you to make an informed decision. If you just look into three aspects, well, maybe, oh no, let's continue throwing, plastic cups into the ocean. That's, in terms of water, it's better, or in terms of detergent. So let's be really critic and alert to this type of research, I would say. We have 3 more minutes, Aile. What are the questions?
Yeah, well,
Well, exactly. Someone is saying microplastics problem is usually not part of an LCA. LCA is a life cycle analysis because it is close to impossible to quantify its impact. Of course. Same thing with how is microplastics and these toxic chemicals affecting our health. Unfortunately, and no, thankfully, and fortunately, we cannot isolate a human and expose it to toxic chemicals to, have a scientific report that says, oh yes, exposing to plastic gives you cancer. We cannot do that, but we are proving with animals that this is the case. So yes, we don't have a scientific paper that backs up this, that makes this direct link, but we know already that all these toxic chemicals are affecting the health of our health and animals' health. So this is proven. So some things are just difficult for science to make the direct conclusion. But if we put 2 + 2, we know it's 4. Well, whoever wants to follow up with questions, because I see that some Some of them want to follow up. Some others ask about presentations at schools. I think we are missing some questions, unfortunately. I'm happy that that you are all still here, so I hope you liked it. I really enjoyed this exchange. We are happy to continue the conversation. Either you can send us an email to hello@unplastify.com. See how we can collaborate with you, with your organizations, with your schools, your companies, whatever you do. We are happy to see how we can collaborate, and happy. And I encourage you to take the challenge of thinking and committing to what can you do from now on to contribute to this unplastifying the world. So thank you for being there, for your attention, for everything, and hopefully we can continue staying connected.
So to everyone, thank
Gracias.
you. Gracias. And that's it. We want to invite you to explore your own relationship with plastic. So go ahead and tell us how is it going. Adios.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you from the UK.
Woohoo. Bye.
Bye.
Cortamos el video, ¿vale?
Okay.